And we're back with On the Record with Tiffany. And I have Sarah Holland and Beth Silvers from Pantsuit Politics. Ladies, we're approaching the big day, and we're seeing record numbers of Americans coming out and voting. As we see this, what are you experiencing with what's your demographic for Pantsuit Politics? Is it mainly women? What's your demographics there?
Yeah, I would say mostly women. We have some very dedicated male listeners, but when we make this show, we think about women who are like us, women who are raising families and working and trying to make their communities as strong and vibrant as they can be.
So as you're looking at the ladies and gentlemen that are your listeners, what are they saying to you about this current political environment?
That it's not working and they want something different. I mean, I think that's why they listen to our show, is because we try to present a very different type of conversation that's not a debate where people just talk at each other about the sort of partisan talking points or pretend that one side has really a monopoly on what is true or right. And I think we see people really fundamentally reevaluating their own politics, the issues that animate them, because I think so many people are really frustrated and heartbroken and ready for a much, much, much different approach to politics, not just how we talk about it, but how we really operate inside our political system.
When you see the frustration and the heartbreak, do you also see some hope in that?
Oh, yes, for sure.
I think one of the biggest things that we hear too is that our listeners have a real understanding that it's not like we elect Joe Biden as president and everything is fixed. I think people really understand that U.S. politics did not get where we are in 4 years, and it will not be out of it in 4 years. And that it is also not all at the national level, that some of the best, most effective, quickest change can happen in our local communities. And so what gives me so much hope is our listeners are not only voting, but they're finding ways to get involved. And for some of them, that's running for office or volunteering with campaigns. But for others, it's just having more challenging conversations in their workplaces than they've had before, or getting involved with a local nonprofit because an issue is really speaking to their heart. I think everybody is trying to find, what can I contribute to the solution here? And, if you bring even a small percentage of Americans into a new frame of reference about wanting to be part of the solution, that is transformative. And so that's what really makes me excited about what we're hearing from our audience right now.
Well, and I think when I look at this election season, I heard somebody say, we don't have election day anymore, it's election season. And I love that so much, is a turning away from cynicism. That's what I care about more than almost anything else. I want people to turn away from the idea that it doesn't matter. I think what people have seen is that it in fact matters deeply, and that people can't change, and it's all is lost. And I think what you see in those lines and lines of people waiting to vote is just a turning away from that, a turning away from the cynicism and a turning towards, I'm going to try and I'm going to be involved, and it might be frustrating and heartbreaking, but in the end it will be worth it. And in the end I am needed, not because I'm an expert, but because I'm a citizen. And democracies depend on the involvement and the enthusiasm of their citizens. And cynicism is really toxic to that. And so I hope, no matter what, that we're seeing people turn away from that cynicism.
I hope so too. When we're out and talking to people and just kind of taking a little pulse of what's going on, because if you watched the news, you would think that everybody's just at each other's throats, but the reality is that most Americans are just trying to figure out how to deal with the pandemic. What's
Mm-hmm.
people are scared because they don't know how this is going to affect them. Speaking of coronavirus, like how will the virus affect them? And they're trying to figure out what do they need to do? How do they protect themselves? How do they protect their children? With us opening up schools and so many single moms, your demographic is mothers. Are you hearing a lot of questions about what they should do? What's the responsible thing to do?
Our audience has settled into understanding that the pandemic is real. I think members of our audience have had enough individual experiences with COVID to know that it's not something to take lightly. My own mother was hospitalized for 15 days with COVID and is still on supplemental oxygen.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It is a very intense time, and I trust the science that social distancing and mask wearing and hand washing are our best ways to protect ourselves. Our listeners are worn out with that. They are tired of doing it. They are tired of having to deal with kids at home from school. School not being open has had an incredibly devastating effect on single parents, working parents, parents who are able to work from home, parents who aren't able to work from home. What I think about this all the time. My husband and I are perfectly situated to handle having both of our kids here, and it is so hard. It is so draining. We are all at the very end of our ropes, and we have so many. Our challenges are so few compared to many of our friends and neighbors. And so I think where our audience is landing is I take these steps not because I'm afraid of getting COVID-19, but because I am part of something bigger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I felt comfortable that I could get it and survive it, I would be a drain on my healthcare providers, and they don't need anybody else to take care of right now. I would put another obstacle in my family's path. What happens to my kids if I get sick right now?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to my spouse if I get sick right now?
Mm-hmm.
We cannot afford another ounce of grief in most of our lives right now. We're just on fumes. And so to us, the only thing we can keep doing is just putting one foot in front of the other, voting like it matters because it does, and taking these simple safety precautions that we're being asked to take. And you say simple and people think that means you're minimizing the gravity of the sacrifice. And I don't mean to do that at all. I understand that even just putting the mask on has a psychological tax associated with it. But as someone who loves a person who's still recovering from COVID, I can tell you that tax is nothing compared to the trauma of someone in your life going through this in a present way and losing someone. I mean, it just doesn't have to be the weight on us all that it is because of our failure to follow these guidelines and the vacuum of leadership we've had at the federal level. And so let's choose differently. That's just my everyday plea. Let's choose differently.
And I share your everyday plea. I mean, it seems like it needs to be a mantra that we all, and it feels like looking at the voter turnout that a lot of people feel the same thing. Like, hey, there are groups out there like the Lincoln Project that have just basically said, you know what, we got something to say about this. Are you all familiar with the Lincoln Project?
Oh yeah, definitely. And we were talking about it on our show today. I said, like, in what universe is it surprising? In what pandemic universe is it surprising that a group of senior citizens and women are the ones turning away from our national leadership right now? Because they are disproportionately affected by that failure of leadership. And that should not be surprising to anyone with eyes to see in this current environment.
And they're probably amongst the most intense about what's happening in the current environment. it's been interesting. I remember the mantra uh, that we heard during 2016. 'Cause 2016, everybody thought that it was going to be Hillary Clinton that would be the president of the United States, and that didn't happen. And we heard, oh, this is going to be great because we have somebody who's never been uh,
Yep.
who's never been in politics before, so it couldn't possibly get uh, to the state that we're in right now.
Yeah.
No one thought that that was going to happen. Uh, do you think that there could possibly be any sort of upset this time?
Well, I think it's hard to know because the polls look like Joe Biden will win this election. I think it's, I was reading 538 today, and I think it was like 87 out of 100 scenarios Joe Biden wins. But there are still 13 scenarios where Joe Biden loses. And that's what we saw happen in 2016. The odds were about the same at this point in the race. I also think this time we have such a host of factors that we don't know what to make of because we haven't voted in a pandemic before. We don't know what all the early voting means for the results. And I hope to just kind of take a breath and realize that getting to this election from here, the next couple of weeks are going to be taxing. The race always feels like it's tightening coming into election day. Everything gets very tense. Most of us are not our best selves. And the next 2 weeks, the media cycles will be maddening. The conversations we have in our personal lives will be strained, and it will be very hard. And it could be very hard for a couple of days after the election, maybe a week after the election, maybe more than that, as we ensure that votes are counted. We're just facing a situation here that's unlike one we've been in before. It could also be that we know on election night because the result is so overwhelming. It's very hard to know what we're walking into. My mantra about this would be, let's all prioritize our democracy, because getting these results right and Americans having confidence in this election that will have ramifications for decades after this election. Mm-hmm. And if we decide we're so invested in one particular outcome or another that we delay a peaceful transition of power in some way, that we bring violence to our streets about this, that we tax the court system with challenges, that we get into a media frenzy where we talk about how we don't know what's happened here, we could really do some serious long-term damage. And again, we got enough of that going on. We don't need to add to it. So I think patience and steadiness are going to be really important for about the next month.
And thank you, ladies, for coming and for Zooming with me, and for being on the record with Tiffany. And we're going to end on that note. And I just want to say to my listeners, these are difficult conversations, and this is a difficult time. But remember that we are more alike than we are different, and we're in this together. So we have to have these conversations if we want to move forward and to be the best United States that we can be. That's the key to the phrase, United States. Mm-hmm. Have a wonderful day, and thank you, ladies, for being a part of On the Record with Tiffany.
Thank you.